If you have a true scary story that you'd like to hear featured on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. And of course, thank you. I grew up in a religious home until I moved out at the age of 18, right after high school. As a kid, my parents loved to send us older kids to any church retreat they could. Most of the time, they were pretty fun. Getting away from my family to hang out with friends with free roam most of the time, and my own money to spend how I want, what kid wouldn't enjoy it? The ones I did not like, however, were the camping trips. The one where they would actually have us sleep in tents in the good old outdoors. That was not my thing. I hated the heat and getting hot and sweaty. I hated most bugs, and I wasn't a fan of most sports. I also was not a fan of going swimming in the lakes we camped by, but that's a scary story in and of itself. So, needless to say, I didn't typically have fun with those, but I was still required to go. So, when my summer came around one year, they signed myself and my older sister up for one of their summer retreats in Texas. It was going to be 5 days long, but at least my sister and a few of my friends would be there. Most of the events and activities were done as a whole, but there were a few things they split up by age and gender. The sleeping area was split up as well by genders. Most of us slept in tents, but there was one cabin on each side, male and female, that some people got to stay in either due to disabilities or paying for an actual cabin room. If you guessed our parents didn't pay for those, then you are correct. We just got tents and sleeping bags. The first night wasn't that bad. It actually seemed to be a bit cooler, and I even slept with my tent open to keep it cool. It had a mesh cover, thankfully, to keep the bugs out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done that. It was a bit hard to sleep, however, as there wasn't much cushion between the bottom of the tent and the sleeping bag. However, I sucked it up and made it through the first night. The first actual day there was fun. They had a few games planned out for us, which included a water balloon/water gun fight, so we got to stay cool. Then we all met in the auditorium-like center, where we had a sermon. Afterwards, we had dinner, and then had free time to do as we pleased. That night was about the same, but instead of getting used to it over time, it became less and less bearable, so it was taking longer to fall asleep and stay asleep. I also felt like I was becoming paranoid as I heard what sounded like someone walking outside the tents. I kept trying to tell myself it was probably just one of the camp counselors and to ignore it. On one of those days, though, I started feeling ill. My stomach was constantly in knots, and I had the start of what I now know as a migraine. I didn't want to do anything, but I wasn't allowed to do that until free time. So I just had to grin and bear it and put in the bare minimum so they would leave me alone. At one point, just to get out of playing volleyball, I asked to use the restroom and quickly started heading towards them. Thankfully, there was an actual building for them near our tents, so we weren't stuck using those portable ones. The entrance didn't have a door though, but a long wall that went kind of in an up and down motion. I suppose it was done this way so that they didn't have to put in doors, and this way the wall blocked the view in so no one could see anything from the outside. As I approached the building, I saw a guy standing nearby, and he seemed to be picking up stuff off the ground and putting it in a trash bag. I figured he probably worked for the park, and was cleaning up, so I didn't pay him much mind. I wasted some time there, though, resting my head against the wall, splashing my face with water, anything I could to buy me some time. As I finally started heading back, I saw that guy at the entrance, and he looked like he was staring down the hall that leads into the restrooms. He smiled at me, saying hi, and asked if I was okay. Knowing how the rest of the adults had acted toward me and how I was feeling, I said my stomach was upset, but I would be fine. He motioned at me to wait there, and I watched as he walked over towards a patch of grass and picked certain leaves and returned. He told me to chew on these for a few minutes and then spit them out. Being a kid, I of course looked at him funny. He had a slight laugh as he explained what it was, and to this day, I still don't remember, and he explained that it helps with upset stomach. I did as he said and started chewing on them, and he told me to head back to the group and to spit them out before I got there, and I should start feeling better. And that's what I did. To my surprise, it actually seemed to work too. I finished playing, and by the time we were having dinner, I was feeling much better. Unfortunately, the effect wouldn't last, and by the time I was going to bed, I was in pain and feeling sick again. I ended up cutting my free time short just so I could go lay down. I apparently managed to fall asleep as I woke up when it was pitch black and silent outside. The worst part was that I woke up because of the pain again. I was lying down and it felt like my head was spinning. I was sweating and I felt like I was going to get sick. Since there was no way I was going to be able to go home early, I decided to try and make my way to the restroom before I made a mess in my tent. I grabbed my little flashlight and tried to make my way to the restroom as quickly and quietly as I could. When I got close enough, I put my hand on the wall of the restroom to help steady myself as I walked around to the entrance, but I was startled when I saw a guy sitting on the bench right outside the restrooms. I recognized him and his voice once he spoke, though, and knew it was the guy that gave me the leaves. He asked me where I was going, and all I said was I didn't feel good, and started walking in the room. He tried to make small conversation with me, but I ignored it and went in, fearing I was going to get sick. After sitting in there on my knees and dry heaving, nothing else happened. I was just leaning on my arms at this point, trying to gain my composure and figure out what I was going to do next, when I heard the guy ask, "Do you need help with anything?" Now, at the time, I hadn't realized this, but the guy sounded very clear, like he may have been partially inside the restrooms, like in the hallway part. I thought it was a weird question to ask though, but I just said no. I again splashed water on my face at the sink, and finally walked out when I felt I could walk again. Sure enough, the guy was still out there, as if he was waiting for me. He asked me if I needed help getting back, and I didn't know how to answer other than saying, "I just want to go home." Before I even realized, he had one arm around my waist and was quietly, almost whispering to me that he could take me home. I was around 13 at the time. I was sick and not thinking straight, so I agreed at first. He started leading me away, but I was at least coherent enough to notice that he wasn't leading me back towards the camping area, but into even darker trees. Now I was getting scared. I tried asking where we were going, and he said he knew a shortcut through the trees. I started hesitating as I was walking, saying I didn't want to go that way, and I noticed he grabbed my waist tighter, and his tone became more and more aggressive. He was saying, "If you want to go home, you have to go this way. You don't have a choice. Now walk." And rightfully so, began to terrify me even more. All of this, again, caused the dizziness to come back and the nausea. I tried telling him I was going to get sick, and he must have thought I was lying. As he tried to pull me in closer to possibly pick me up, this didn't go the way he anticipated, as when he went to pick me up, I threw up in his direction. It did cause him to let go of me and shout a few choice words, and I quickly ran away. I didn't have my flashlight anymore, so I ran, praying I didn't step or trip on anything. I finally saw a light that was coming from the cabin and ran towards it. And once close enough, I ran to my tent, zipping it up and completely hiding in my sleeping bag. And I did not fall back asleep that night either. I didn't even get up when it was light out and I heard others talking, in fear that it could have been that guy coming back. It wasn't until one of the counselors came over to my tent and started calling for me that I finally came out. I must have finally looked sick enough to them, because they immediately had the nurse check me out and suggested I go home or to the hospital at least. While I was lying in the cabin, waiting for my parents to come get me, someone else was packing up my stuff. The nurse was in the room with me, and she had asked me why I hadn't told anyone how I was feeling. I tried explaining that I had, but no one believed me except the guy with the leaves. But then I explained to them that he was really scary and mean about taking me home. That's when I became really terrified, because she looked at me confused, asking, "What guy?" I began explaining to her more what the guy looked like and my encounters with him. She then walked out of the cabin and yelled for one of the counselors. Sure enough, the guy I saw was definitely not part of the church staff. Someone else had mentioned seeing him, but it was a public park, so they assumed he was just another visitor or possibly someone that worked there. They reported it to the police and they went out looking for him, but he was never found as far as I know. They cut the trip a day short. I remember because my parents tried to get a refund for the days I wasn't there, and the day my sister came back early too. Never mind the fact that it ended early to keep your kids safe though, right? So, there's some strange guy out at a park in Texas that feeds leaves to kids and then tries to kidnap them. Oh yeah, also, my parents took me to the hospital and it turned out I had food poisoning. Oh, and I still don't like camping either. As you're a kid, summer camp is synonymous with freedom, adventure, and summertime fun. My experience, on the other hand, is nowhere near fun. My time at the summer camp back when I was 12 years old took a horrendous turn just 3 days into camp, when I decided that I wanted to take a hike alone, a decision that quickly turned into the most painful thing I have ever gone through. The summer camp I went to was this neat little Bible-focused place in the middle of the woods, tucked away in the middle of nowhere Midwest. I had gone to this camp once prior and had no problems. This was my second time going, and because I was 12, I was part of the young teen group. This meant that during the time at the camp, we were given free days to, in their words, find ourselves and venture into God's glory. Basically, go out into the woods with friends and enjoy nature. Now, I didn't have any friends, which meant that I did my hikes solo. Despite this, these were my absolute favorite days of camp. I loved going out and identifying the plants, the birds, the bugs, all of it. They would give us a checklist that we could fill out for a prize. I never found out what the prize was because I never saw a chipmunk while I was there, which, thinking back, I guess I could have just checked it off and said that I saw one. Tangent aside, I had a great time just being out by myself. It was on one such hike that my day took a sharp turn, both literally and figuratively. Walking along the narrow dirt path, my foot got caught on a large tree root, and I was sent tumbling down into a small gully just to the side of the dirt path. It wasn't a large ditch or anything, but it was enough that the fall was definitely going to hurt. I remember feeling the dirt slip out from underneath me, getting a sudden jolt of pain, and then an overwhelming feeling of fatigue. To put it bluntly, I had fallen down and somehow hit my head and basically knocked myself out cold. When I woke up, the forest seemed really weirdly silent, and like it was spinning. Dazed, I tried to piece together what exactly had happened. I was lying face down on the ground, my arm throbbing in pain. I was incredibly confused and woozy for all of 10 seconds, which is when the real pain kicked in. A burning sensation spread across my face and arm. The intensity of it was enough to make me jump up to my knees from where I was lying. I brushed my hand across my face to figure out why I was in so much agony when I came to a horrifying realization. Fire ants. I had fallen face first into a fire ant mound. I started screaming, my shouts echoing through the woods as I jumped up and sprinted back to camp, slapping and brushing at my face and arms in a desperate attempt to get the ants off my skin. The pain just kept feeling like it was getting worse and worse. And I just remember thinking for some reason that they were burrowing under my skin. That's how bad it hurt. When I got back to the camp, one of the counselors saw what was going on and immediately rushed me to the shower room, not wasting a moment to get my clothing off and blasting me with cold water from one of the detachable shower heads. Each and every drop of that water was a small bit of relief as it washed away the ants. I literally sobbed as I watched those little bastards go down the drain. Of course, that wasn't the end of it. I don't know if you know this, but fire ants contain a venom called piperidine, something I looked up while I was typing this out. It's a nasty venom that, when you get too much of it in you, such as when you're stung by hundreds of these suckers, can and will cause some major issues. This was the day I learned that I wasn't allergic to them, which was probably the only mercy in all of this. I did, however, get horribly sick, throwing up, struggling to sleep through the pain, dealing with other issues. The swelling and blistering on my face were so bad that I could barely open my eyes. I remember one of the kids coming to visit me in the hospital, and he joked that my face looked like hamburger. This comment alone added a whole new level of terror to this. As mentioned, I wasn't allergic, thankfully. If I were, I can tell you that this story would have had a much more grim ending, one that someone else would have had to have written. I was left with a number of scars from the blistering and scabbing on my face, and I still actually have these scars all this time later. The right side of my face is definitely not my good side, is all I'll say to that. To this day, I cannot stand the sight of ants. Each tiny little bugger reminding me of that hike and what they're capable of. I guess all I can say is if you decide to go hiking out alone on a summer day, try to watch your step. And if you see a mound of dirt that is teeming with activity, just stay away from it because the consequences might just leave you scarred. In the summer of 2012, I went on a camping trip with my church group. There were 12 of us kids, all around the age of 10, give or take a year, and 6 adults, all crammed in between 2 vans, and we drove about 8 hours to a national park in Arkansas. I had been camping a few times before with my parents and 2 siblings, so it was nothing new to me, and I was actually pretty excited about the trip too. It was, however, the first kind of trip like this I've taken that wasn't just a lock-in at the church, so I didn't realize how planned and following a strict schedule it was going to be. The camp was going all right otherwise. It was early June, but it wasn't too hot. We were going to be there from Thursday to Sunday. We got there in the evening on Thursday, so after setting up all of our tents, we had dinner, went over our itinerary for the weekend and the rules, and then we were left to do whatever we wanted that night, as long as we stayed within the campgrounds. Since I couldn't go very far, I instead looked for a good branch I could keep as a walking stick, and out of boredom, try to sharpen one end to a point with a rock. For Friday, they had all these planned activities, such as icebreakers and team building exercises. Some of the activities even involved water balloons, which was a plus, as it helped us stay cool. They were fun at least. I did have a few friends that were there too, so we teamed up on the activities. We again had downtime in between these and the church sermons, but once again, we couldn't leave the campgrounds. So my friends and I found ways to keep us entertained. Our church wasn't very big, so there weren't a lot of extra things planned for us. So we were just expected to be entertained by each other and the small things we were allowed to bring, like a book and no electronics, of course. I was excited for Saturday because we were going to actually be taking a hiking trail around the park. It was fun, but still a very by-the-book hike. We were split into 2 groups, so I was with 5 other kids and 2 of the counselors. It was still nice, but we stuck to the trail and listened to the counselors talk about their experience there back when they were a kid, and they talked about some of the stuff they did, and they tied it all back to our lesson or sermon for the day. Needless to say, it was fun, but I still wanted to be able to just explore on my own. That's how I've always been. I wanted to experience things for myself. I wanted to encounter wildlife as it was, not something set up for people to take pictures with on a designated path. So, when we stopped to take a quick break on the trail, I made the decision to explore a bit. Everyone was sitting around having their snack and talking, so I stood up and started pacing nearby, looking at the surrounding area. When the counselors weren't looking in my direction, I walked off a bit deeper into the trees beyond the trail. Before I realized it, the trail and my group were completely out of my sight, and I was deep within the thicket of trees. I knew I just needed to turn around and walk back the way I came from, but in the meantime, I just wanted to see what was around. I saw a tree that was covered in English ivy, but also saw some of the tallest trees I'd ever seen. I even found a small runoff that had crawdads in it as I caught and released one. That was what I wanted to experience while I was there, and I was happy to finally get to do it. I took a small pebble and a leaf from the ivy and pressed it in my small wallet, then told myself I should head back, knowing they probably noticed I was gone. As I started walking back, I noticed a few things. One, it seemed like it was taking longer to return, but maybe that was just because I didn't want to go back. But two, I wasn't recognizing things around me like I did getting there, and that one was a bigger deal. At some point in time, I must have turned and the once familiar surroundings now felt alien and foreboding, causing almost a sense of dread. I didn't see the start of the trail anywhere, and I couldn't hear anyone talking. I did my best to remain calm and thought it would be best to walk in one direction, and eventually, I would have to make my way out, even if it wasn't in the same place as my group. I continued walking the path I was creating when I started to hear the crunch of leaves on the ground ahead of me. I perked up as the fear started subsiding, thinking I had found my way out, but that was quickly trampled when I saw the source of the sound. It was a bear, and it hadn't noticed me as it was facing away and moving something around on the ground, but I was frozen in fear. This was a church camp, not Boy Scouts, nor was I ever in Boy Scouts. I had no idea what to do when you encounter a bear. I was in the middle of these woods with no one around except a huge, powerful creature capable of tearing me to shreds. It hadn't noticed me yet, so the only thing I could think to do was hide before it did spot me and wait it out. I slowly walked backwards and looked around when I saw a tree with some kind of growth on it. It had some low branches, but they were sturdy enough for me to stand on. I slowly climbed up the tree, trying to make as little noise as possible, but every slight crunch under my shoes or snap of the little branches made my stomach drop. I was finally up high enough that I deemed myself safe and stayed as still and quiet as I could. The bear lingered for what felt like eternity, shuffling through the brush and rocks on the ground. I feared I would end up staying there overnight. I just prayed an adult would be crazy enough to do what I did and show up to bring me back to safety. I was up there for about half an hour. I was counting seconds and marking it into the tree since I had nothing better to do. That's when I started hearing more crunching, but it wasn't from the bear. I started looking around when I saw a figure coming through the trees. I started crying and I wanted to scream out to them, but I was worried what the bear would do if it saw either of us. Of course, my kid brain decided to risk it and I started screaming for help. Both the bear and the man stopped. The bear had stood up on its back legs and looked like it was sniffing the air. I kept screaming my location and warned the man about the bear. As he slowly approached, he stopped by a different tree when he spotted the bear himself. Then, he started yelling, whistling, and waving his arms around. To my surprise, the bear got back down on all fours and swiftly started walking off. When he was just out of view, the man approached the tree and told me to come down, asking me my name. I answered him, and as I tried climbing down the tree and nearly jumped into his arms, he told me people had been looking for me, and I just started crying. I was so scared in those moments, and I really didn't expect to be searched for, or at least found anytime soon. He led me back to the trail and used a walkie to report that I had been found. He gave me some water as we walked the path and just talked to me about myself and the park, which helped me calm down. He told me about how making yourself look big and loud is a good way to get a bear to leave, and I will never forget that, even though I hope to never run into another bear unless it's at a zoo. We finally made our way back to our campsite, and I hugged and thanked the man for helping me. Tears streamed down my face with a mixture of gratitude and sheer exhaustion. I then ran over to one of the counselors, hugging them as well. They all explained how they noticed I was missing when they had started walking again on their break. I had been gone for nearly 3 hours. I definitely got a stern talking to about the situation. I lost my free time that night and had to help set up for dinner, but I honestly didn't mind. I was just glad to be back with familiar faces and not lost in the woods helpless. That night, as I lie in my sleeping bag, the events replayed in my mind. I could remember the smells of the trees and the grass and the dirt. I remembered the sensation of the water. I remembered the pure terror sneaking up on me as I realized I was lost, and the defeat I felt when I saw the bear. They all ingrained themselves into my memory, and it was a stark reminder that sometimes rules are there for a reason, and the reason for the rules I broke that day were to protect me from the untamed wilderness. I went home that Sunday a little more mature, and I promise you, I never ventured somewhere like that alone, ever again. So that, my friends, was a collection of summer stories. Thought we should squeeze those in there because, technically August is still summer, even though kids are back in school. So there we go. There we have it. And, I'm glad summer's almost over. I'm done with the heat. Even in Minnesota, the humidity, I thought it was bad in Kansas. Don't like it here. But that's why I'm ready for autumn, ready for winter, and we can enjoy that type of weather. So hopefully you guys have had a good summer, though. Hopefully you got to do something fun and memorable, as well as stayed hydrated and not get sunburnt, because I'm bad about both of those. So hopefully you guys did better than me. Anyways, I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and if so, please do give it a like below to let me know, or you can leave a comment on the video. I lost my train of thought. Leave a comment on the video on your thoughts, or tell me about what you did do over the summer, what you still have planned if you don't, or tell me, do you eat pizza for breakfast? And I'm not just talking breakfast pizza, I'm talking that chicken supreme. Yeah. And with that being said, my friends, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day and a wonderful rest of your week. And until next time, take care.